Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you are very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. Let's talk about refugees. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, which I will be calling the OED from this point on, the word refugee first appears in the English language sometime before 1628 in the writings of Sir Fulke Greville. He died in that year, 1628. In Greville's The Life of the Renowned Sir Philip Sidney, he explains how Elizabeth I, despite being, quote, not yet out of danger of her Romish subjects at home, threatened with their mighty faction and party abroad, settles these poor refugees in Norwich, Colchester, Sandwich, Maidstone, and Southampton. By refugees, he is in this case referring specifically to, quote, a Protestant who fled France to seek refuge elsewhere from religious persecution in the 17th, and later the term would expand to refer to those who did so in the 18th centuries, especially following the revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685. Today, I want to take a look at this community and, among other things, explore their history in England. Let's go. This French Protestant community is the one that, according to the National Archives, quote, gave the word refugee to the English language. As Jessica Brain explains, quote, it was to be the first use of the terminology to describe the population who had escaped from persecution in their country of origin and resettled somewhere else in hope of a better and safer existence. This community were also known as Huguenots. According to the OED, the first extant record of the use of the term Huguenot dates to 1565. And it was used to refer to, quote, a member of the Calvinistic or Reformed Communion of France in the 16th and 17th centuries, a French Protestant. In French, originally a nickname, said to have been imported from Geneva. If we look to the website of the Huguenot Society, we learn, quote, it was the name given in the 16th century to the Protestants in France, particularly by their enemies. Interestingly, the etymology of this term is, as we can see, heavily disputed. But, quote, according to Hatzfield and Darmestetter, who cites the form Huguenot from the Chronicle de Genève of 1550, a popular alteration of German Eidgenots, Dutch Eidgenot, Confederate, under the influence of the personal name Hughes, Hugh. Huguenots and its variants connect the idea of fellowship to individuals who are bound by an oath and, or perhaps more specifically, to members of the Swiss Confederacy. As for the Hugh part, that might connect to the political and faith leader Besançon Hughes. Nevertheless, decades before the first recorded use of the term Huguenot, England was already making space for this community and for their worship. In July 1550, King Edward VI and his government issued a charter that granted the Church of the Augustine Friars in London to, quote, strangers and foreigners, banished and cast out from their own country for the sake of the gospel of Christ. According to the wording of this charter, this was to be done as an act of Christian mercy, but also as a means of protecting and preserving the faith and, quote, liberty of the gospel that had begun to be weakened and hard-pressed by the domination of the papacy. According to the records, the first French Protestant church in England was founded in the same year that this charter was produced, 1550. It was founded in Threadneedle Street. Another so-called Strangers' Church in Soho would come soon after. We do see a Huguenot church and its congregation featuring in this, the second scene of William Hogarth's Four Times of the Day, produced between 1736 and 1738. This is the scene that is set at and called noon. I wonder what you make of Hogarth's choices here. The way this image is seemingly split between the churchgoers who appear to spill out in family groups. They all appear to be well groomed and expensively dressed for the most part. with some younger members of the group, right up at the front of the image, being shown to have been attired in the cutting edge of fashion of the day. The lady is sporting what looks to be heavy rouge circles on her cheeks. Behind it appears that there are two older ladies who are putting on a very affectionate display. On the other side of the street, we see an English tavern, at the sign of the head of John the Baptist, and we also see its community. In an upper window, it seems that a couple are struggling, and a plate of food is being thrown by them, perhaps falling in their quarrel, into the street. In the street, we see a woman, who I think we can assume is the barmaid of the tavern, but she is being distracted from her duties by the attentions of her lover, and so she is shown spilling the contents of her pie. A weeping boy in front of her is holding a broken plate. He has lost his food to the floor. At his feet, though, we see a girl scrabbling around in the dirt, possibly for something to eat for herself. Please do let me know what you think Hogarth intended with this image. Also, is The Times of the Day another series by Hogarth that I should perhaps explore in another video? Do let me know. Whatever we might think that William Hogarth is trying to tell his audience about these two communities, I think it's fair to say that it's up for discussion, debate, even dispute. This is, by no means, an uncomplicated image, and perhaps that's fitting. Because certainly, those who made use of the various so-called stranger churches would not enjoy a totally uncomplicated refuge in England. The reign of Edward VI's half-sister, the devout Roman Catholic Mary Tudor, perhaps unsurprisingly, led to a pause in Huguenot people seeking refuge in England from religious persecution in France. At the start of the 1560s, some Huguenots might have felt that they would be safe in France. Certainly, it could have seemed they were going to be permitted to worship as they saw fit in that country. Stephen M. Davis points out that in 1562, there were approximately 2 million Huguenots in France, who were able to worship in the 1,000 to 2,000 churches that had been founded for the purpose. At the start of 1562, the Edict of Saint-Germain was issued by the French regent Catherine de Medici. This aimed, I think, to calm religious tensions and to foster toleration. It allowed Protestant services to be held in private and outside of some towns. However, on the 1st of March 1562, when the Duke of Guise and his men came across a Huguenot congregation worshipping in a barn outside the town of Versailles, they reacted violently. They failed to give the worshippers any real chance to disperse peacefully. Instead, they went in with all guns blazing, literally. Many were seriously wounded and more than 50 were killed. On the 2nd of April 1562, the Protestant prince Louis of Condé led what is often viewed as a retaliatory attack on Orleans. On the 19th of March 1563, Catherine de Medici signed the Edict of Amboise, which allowed Protestant nobles to hold services for their households. It was also permitted for non-noble Protestant services to be held in one town in each judicial district, with the exception of Paris. And after this, there was certainly a pause in the hostilities, at least for a little while. Because nevertheless, the period between 1562 and 1598 is remembered for a series of violent clashes that are known today as the French Wars of Religion. A decade after the start of this collection of conflicts, in the August of 1572, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre took place. I've made a video on this event that I will leave linked, but briefly, during this massacre and in its aftermath, it is reported that around 70,000 Huguenots were murdered across France. This massacre is pointed to as the real starting point for large numbers of religious refugees to flee France in favour of religiously reforming safe havens on the continent, but also, as we know, for England. The National Archives website explains that, quote, escaping France by boat, their reception in England was complex. England did provide a safe refuge for Protestants, with significant Huguenot communities established in Spitalfields, Wandsworth, Canterbury, Sandwich, Faversham and Maidstone. Within defined limits and regulations, the English government provided poor relief to refugees who needed it, and could also provide letters of denisation, sanctioning Huguenots to become British subjects. Spitalfields soon became home to a large Huguenot community, many of whom were silk weavers, and we see them being represented once again in the work of William Hogarth. In this image from 1741, from his Industry and Idleness series, the first plate is a look in a silk weaver's workshop in Spitalfields. Through this series as a whole, we are shown how being apprenticed into this trade could offer wonderful opportunities for someone who was prepared to be diligent. Indeed, according to this series, such a person could reach truly dazzling heights. And perhaps this image and this series masks the truth of life for the majority of Spitalfield's Huguenot community, because most of East London's silk weavers were relatively poor, in spite of the luxurious fabric that they produced. The Huguenot community in Soho were, though, by and large, much better off. They were, as the website of the London Museum points out, silver and goldsmiths, watch and clockmakers, gunmakers, merchants, lens makers, bookbinders, cabinet makers, printers, and paper makers. Within the collection of the London Museum, there are examples of the kinds of work produced by this better-off Huguenot community. Within the collection, for example, there is the work of David Willaume, a gold and silversmith or metalworker. Further research on him shows that he was subsequently a banker or financier, that he was naturalised or indenizened in 1687. We can find out that he held premises in Charing Cross, Pall Mall, and in Mayfair. The museum also holds the work of David Lesturgeon. He came to London in 1681 with his son, who had the same name. David Sr. was admitted into the Clockmakers' Company in 1698, and he remained a member right up until his death in 1731. His son, David Jr., would also join the company in 1721. David Sr. reportedly, quote, specialised in watches commemorating the coronation of Queen Anne and the death of William III. He and his son both plied their trades in the City of London. The London Museum's collection also includes work by the gunmaker Isaac Riviere. He specialised in the creation of pistols and had premises on Oxford Street and also in Piccadilly. Highly skilled tradesmen and craftsmen were prized by many individuals within the English government. They were hoping to improve domestic production and also trade, which in turn would reduce England's dependence on expensive imports. Instead, through these individuals' labours, England could perhaps be the one to profit from expensive luxury exports that were now being created within their state. However, this did lead to animosity from some English tradesmen and craftsmen who apparently feared that they would lose custom and or perhaps go out of business altogether. According to Scott Macmillan, there was a, quote, crisis over aliens that was troubling the City of London. In time, as with so many crises, this would be reflected in the work of the professional playing companies. And perhaps a key example of this can be found in the multi-authored play of Sir Thomas More. The date of this play is debated, but it is believed to have been edited at a later date by multiple hands, including apparently William Shakespeare's. But the consensus is that the original version dates to the early 1590s, with the edits occurring, we think, perhaps at the start of the next century. One of the key moments in this play is a dramatisation of the anti-immigrant riot that took place on the 1st of May 1570 in reality. This was known to history as Evil May Day. In the world of the play, when he is confronting the rioters, the character of Sir Thomas More declares, quote, grant them removed, and grant that this your noise hath chid down all the majesty of England. Imagine that you see the wretched strangers, their babies at their backs and their poor luggage plodding to the ports and coasts for transportation, and that you sit as kings in your desires, authority quite silent by your brawl, and you in ruff of your opinions clothed. What had you got? I'll tell you. You had taught how insolence and strong hand should prevail, how order should be quelled, and by this pattern, not one of you should live an aged man. For other ruffians, as their fancies wrought with self-same hand, self-reasons, and self-right, would shark on you. And men, like ravenous fishes, would feed on one another. You will put down strangers, kill them, cut their throats, possess their houses, and lead the majesty of law in line, to slip him like a hound. Say now the king, as he is clement if the offender mourn, should so much come too short of your great trespass, as but to banish you. Whither would you go? What country, by the nature of your error, should give you harbour? Go you to France or Flanders, to any German province, to Spain or Portugal, nay, anywhere that adheres not to England? Why? You must needs be strangers. Would you be pleased to find a nation of such barbarous temper, that breaking out in hideous violence would not afford you an abode on earth? Whet their detested knives against your throats, spurn you like dogs, and like as if that God owed not nor made not you, nor that the elements were not all appropriate for your comforts, but chartered unto them. What would you think to be thus used? This is the stranger's case, and this your mountainish inhumanity. While Evil May Day occurred many decades before the original version of this play is thought to have been written, the tensions that motivated it and the words of the drama were evidently still on the verge of bubbling over. On the night of the 15th of May 1593, a document that is known as the Dutch Church Libel was anonymously posted on the wall of a church that served an immigrant refugee community. This libel was an overt threat of violence. It included the lines, quote, "We'll cut your throats in your temples praying. Not Paris massacre, so much blood did spill." Now, it is my intention to make another video that focuses solely on this libel very soon, so do keep an eye out for that. As for the Huguenots remaining in France, that year, 1593, brought a potentially concerning shift in the position of their faith, as it was also the year that King Henry IV of France converted to the Roman Catholic faith, and he did so to secure his rule over the kingdom. He is reputed to have explained this conversion with one sentence, quote, "Paris is well worth a mass." So what this means is that in the year 1593, the Huguenots in France found that perhaps they could not rely on King Henry IV for any protection, but at the same time, in the same year, a collection of particularly disturbing threats were being levelled against members of the same community in London, where they had fled for a chance of safety. So I imagine that it would have felt, for some at least, like the walls were closing in. But regardless of these threats and the anxiety they surely would have produced, Huguenot refugees did find ways to flourish in their new home. As the National Archives website explains, quote, "The Huguenots made important contributions to the country financially and economically, in sectors of industry, including silk, wine, jewellery, paper and architecture. One such example is James Lehman, a celebrated silk designer. He was one of the first Huguenots to serve on the court of the Weavers' Company, and his exquisite silk designs are available to view in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London." Within a few years, there was renewed hope for the Huguenots in France when, on the 13th of April 1598, Henry IV signed the Edict of Nantes. Richard Cavendish explains that through this edict, quote, "Huguenots were to be entitled to worship freely everywhere in France in private, and publicly in some 200 named towns, and on the estates of Protestant landowners. They were permitted to inherit property, engage in trade, attend all schools and universities, and be treated in hospitals on the same basis as everyone else," which presumably points to this not being the case prior to this. There was a full amnesty for crimes committed during the wars by both sides, and in secret articles signed on May 2nd, the government agreed to pay the Protestant pastors and subsidise the garrisons of some 50 Huguenot fortified towns. Before long, reportedly, even the staunchest Catholic opponents appeared to have been convinced to accept this edict, or at least present themselves as if they did. However, it was not to last, and ultimately this edict would be revoked in 1685, leading once again to a large number of Huguenots seeking refuge in countries that were perceived to be safe for them, like England. Huguenot people would also be swept up in the drive for empire, They became agents of and profited from colonisation and transatlantic slavery. According to the London Museum website, quote, between 1500 and 1800, around 25,000 Huguenots came to London as refugees. As for England as a whole, due to the worsening situation for Protestants in France during the 1680s, there was a massive uptick in those seeking refuge in England. And the London Museum states that, quote, around 40,000 came to England between 1660 and 1714. A population change unlike anything seen here before. Nevertheless, the National Archives website explains that, quote, by the middle of the 18th century, the Huguenots had adjusted and assimilated into English society. Many of them had become fluent in English, risen to positions of authority within society, and married into English families. Broadly, the wealthier Huguenot families were able to assimilate faster, while the poorer communities, which remained largely in Spitalfields, retained a distinct identity for longer. In Spitalfields today, you can visit Denis Sever's house, a reconstruction of the home of a family of 18th century Huguenot silk weavers. The traces of this community are still evident today. According to the London Museum website, quote, it's previously been stated that 1 in 6 people might have Huguenot heritage. That heritage is often seen in people's surnames. Bosanquet, Cazenove, Courtauld, Gambier, Garrick, Minute, Portal, Tizard, and Olivier. Many more surnames may hide Huguenot names which have been anglicised. Boulanger to Baker, Blanc to White, Delacroix to Cross. If you want to see if your own family name has Huguenot links, then you can do what I did. Enter your surname here on the Huguenot names page of the Huguenots in Spitalfields website. I found there was a silk weaver by the name of James Marchant, who was recorded as being in Cock Alley, Bethnal Green, which is not far from where I live today. He was there, though, in 1814. And I do wonder if he and I are somehow related. So what do you think of the story of these early refugees? Of how they occupied contested spaces, of how their skills would become so valuable to the nations that took them in, particularly England, as that is what we have explored today. And what about their representation in works of art and how they are referred to on the stage? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your conversations in the comments section underneath this video. But I'd also love it if you could pop an emoji or a social glyph in the comments too, because that will boost the engagement, get the video shared out more, and hopefully help us grow our community. I'm thinking perhaps we pick a French flag, or maybe something that's more to do with the skills and crafts, maybe some silk weaving, clock making, perhaps avoid anything gunmakery based, just in case the algorithm doesn't like that. But do also let me know why you've picked what you have with words, because the algorithm pixies do apparently like words quite a lot. You can find me elsewhere on social media. I will leave links to places you can find me on the internet in the description box. Please do follow me over on some or all of those so we can continue this conversation and start some others. I do hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, please share it with your friends. If you like the channel, let some pals know about it. You can tell me about this video in particular by hitting the thumbs up. Please do subscribe to the channel, and if you think you are subscribed, have a check now, just to make sure you're not mysteriously unsubscribed against your will. While you are there, checking, subscribing, maybe resubscribing, please do hit the bell icon beside the subscribe button and then select all in the drop down that will appear, and that way YouTube claims that they will tell you when I've next uploaded, and also when I'll next be going live, which I do once a month at the moment to talk about the history news. I get sent lots of news articles relating to things that are connected to history. I put them together and then we sit down and take a look at them together. At the moment, the sessions are going for about 2.5 hours. Sometimes we cover really serious stuff. Often we have stuff that's pretty funny. Either way, it's a good time and you aren't going to want to miss it. We have, of course, got our failsafe. If you head to my website, which I will leave linked, it is www.katrinamarchant.com. And if you go to the contact page, you'll see this box. Please put your email address in that box and then hit sign up. That will add you to my list and will let me send you out an email once a week to let you know what I've been up to, but also to send you useful links for my content for the coming days. I hope you're going to have a great day, whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.